AM 560 mobile app on your Alexa-powered smart speaker on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
Let not your heart be troubled. Listen to me, Sean Hannity. I'll have the latest news and what it all means for you. It's coming up at 2 right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan. And in for MEJ this morning is Scott the Cow Guy Shalady.
Morning. Good morning.
And Scott, being a market savant as you are, do you see the layoffs announced this week? 28,000 employees from Disney, 2/3 of which are part-time workers, but that still leaves, 8,500, 9,000 workers who are full-time workers that are being laid off. It's a big number. As well as United Airlines furloughing 19,000 employees.
United and American, 32 between the two.
232. So what is that?
60,000.
What does that tell you? Is that just PPP running out? Is that the lag in people getting comfortable with re-entering life, which perhaps will subside in the coming days and weeks? Or do you think that's those are real canaries in the coal mine for bad economic times?
I do think they are real canaries in the coal mine because we still don't have an open country, and everybody's they're fooling themselves if they think that we're going to get back to normal with not having these restaurants open to 100% capacity and other venues that are not open to 100% capacity. And you know what? It's going to be damaged and bruised whenever the first day is when the country's 100% wide open, when the last governor, the rollover on that idea is. It'll still take 18 months after that before we get some semblance of normalcy, because we're still going to have people that are scared, that are afraid and are scared, and they're going to only go to the restaurant that's still 6 feet apart for social distancing. Even if there's a vaccine, there's going to be this level of mistrust, distrust, whatever. I just think that you can't shut a $22 trillion economy down and limp your way back without having everything 100% wide open, and away we go, because we have an aircraft carrier of more news like this coming at us very slowly, and we're conveniently just kind of missing it and just turning our heads another way. So I'll say the economy looks like a 15-year-old kid that just grew real quick and is still very uncoordinated. There are some things that are good, but we're still growing into our new knees, right? and that's really what it is.
It's a very powerful metaphor. So maybe, John Tierney wrote this book called The Negativity Effect, and he's talking about how the things that happen in our life that are negative register much more powerfully than things that are positive. So perhaps we need to accentuate the positive, remind people of how things were going pre-pandemic, and wouldn't you like to return to those times as soon as possible? To help us do that, he's written on the topic, reminding people how good things were going economically pre-pandemic. Joined again by Andy Puzder, Senior Fellow at the Pepperdine University School of Public Policy, former CEO of CKE Restaurants, and former nominee for U.S. Labor Secretary as well, author of the recently released Getting America Back to Work and It's Time to Let America Work Again. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be here, Dan. Thanks.
So,
for having me.
Pleasure. And you wrote this piece for Fox Business that there was some news out recently about 2019 income growth that did not get a lot of reporting, didn't get any discussion in the Tuesday night debate. But, people should be reminded of. I know they lived it, but they need to be perhaps reminded of it.
Well, 2019 was really an historic year economically. I think it surpasses really the year of any presidency since the government began tracking the data on income and poverty. Our median family income was up to $68,700. That's a 6.8% increase over 2018. So it's the highest number that was ever achieved for median family income, going back to the 1960s when they started reporting the data. And it was the biggest percentage increase since we started reporting the data. And just to put it in some context, last year, a median family income increased $4,400 approximately. During the entire 8 years of the Obama administration, median family income increased $3,000. So we did more, President Trump's economy did more in 1 year than Obama's and Biden's did in 8. And poverty at the same time, you heard so much about how the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was just for the rich, and only the rich were benefiting from all these policies. Well, it turns out it was a lie. The poverty rate declined to 10.5%. That's the lowest poverty rate since 1959 when they started tracking the poverty rate. It went down about 1.3 percentage points, and for blacks, it went down 7.9 percentage points. Excuse me, it went down 2 percentage points. That went about 2 percentage points down for Hispanics and Asians as well. So the real benefits here were for the minorities. And again, to try and put some perspective around this, we took about 4.1 million people out of poverty last year. During the Biden-Obama 8 years, we added about 800,000 people to the poverty rate, to the ranks of poverty. So it was really an incredible year, I think. And by the way, income inequality also decreased. I think if any other president had these kinds of numbers, they'd be the news would have been on the front page of the New York Times and every other major paper in the country. But because it's President Trump, you didn't hear a word about it.
Andy Scott Shelby, I'm the cow guy. Sometimes I follow you, and you're a tough act to follow on Fox Business. Let me tell you, I'm a big fan. So
good to hear from you, Scott. Same here.
And this goes to that, that argument about, corporations don't pay tax, people pay tax. And guess what? When you cut corporate tax, people have more money, right? They didn't have to pay as much in tax. And I think that follows through to a large part of what you're saying. But my question to you is, I think you probably heard my opinion before you came on. I mean, how long do you think it will take to fill Ann Arbor Stadium with 105,000 people again for 4 hours watching a football game?
Well, my prediction is a little different than yours. I think by Inauguration Day, the bulk of the fear will be gone. I think we'll see a complete switch. One, because we may have a vaccine by that point in time. Secondly, the therapeutics have improved. Our treatment of people with COVID has improved. We know a lot more about this disease today than we did back in March. And I'll tell you that the CDC released survival rates. You always hear death rates. Well, here's survival rates out of the CDC. If you're 0 to 19 years old, your survival rate is 99.997%. Yep. If you're 20 to 49 years old, it's 99.98%. If you're 50 to 69, it's 99.5%. Most of the deaths are people over 70, but that survival rate is 94.6%. So the survival rate from this disease, is much better, I think, than people think it is. And look, one death is too many. I'm not out here trying to minimize anybody's suffering or anybody's death. That this is a terrible thing that we got from China, and it's unfortunate that we're having to go through this as a country. But I think we're getting a handle on it more quickly than people realize. I think there's a lot of push and pull on the issues around COVID because of the upcoming election. But I do think it's time for America to get back to work, as the pamphlet that you mentioned earlier in the show that I just wrote, that's up by Encounter Books, mentions. It's time for us to get started, to get back. But I do agree with you that until we have that vaccine and some time to get it distributed, we're not going to get completely back. But I think we can get back a lot more than we are now. We're certainly in the most dynamic economic recovery the country's ever had. I mean, we've never had 4 months of job creation like the last 4 months. And who would believe by this time this year we'd be back to retail sales would be back where they were pre-pandemic. Household wealth would be above where it was pre-pandemic. That the stock market and real estate markets would be doing as incredibly well as they're doing. And I think part of that is the strength with which we went into the pandemic from 2019, which was an incredible year, plus the programs the president and Congress and then the president on his own put in place to deal with the pandemic. So I think we're on the right track. We're moving quickly, and we need to get the election behind us to really get these issues behind us.
Oh, what do you think about the prospect of more COVID relief? That has not died yet. There's ongoing back and forth between Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as the House Democrats have been willing to at least begin to pare down their asks a bit. Still a good deal apart, but should there even be an administration? Should there be any administration support for COVID relief at this juncture?
Well, there are certain parts of the COVID relief bill on which Republicans and Democrats agree, as you know. And given the needs of certain businesses, you've gone through businesses that are laying employees off, and nobody's going to go to Disney until they feel more confident about this disease. You're not even with these high survivability rates, the word really isn't out there. You're not going to take your kids to Disneyland if you're worried they're going to get a disease that'll kill them. People aren't going to travel as much until we're more confident about where the disease is. So there are industries that we're going to need to help through this. It's unfortunate that it's happened, but it has happened, and we need to address it. So we should agree on the things we can agree on. I know it's all politics, and I know from the very beginning of this crisis that the Democratic leadership's been out there saying, even Joe Biden has been out there saying, look, this disease is an opportunity for us to enact our agenda, to take the country in a more progressive direction. And I think it's horrific that they view this tragedy as an opportunity to change the country. We ought to take the things that Republicans and Democrats agree on, that people need, that people are suffering, need relief, and we should pass those things. So I don't know whether that'll happen till after November 3rd, but I'm hopeful that it will happen.
So, to paraphrase what you just said, I think that this will all be over when I see a 7-year-old couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary in a very hot and crowded Chinese restaurant.
Yeah. It'll be me and my wife. Although
it's very
she's not
specific.
70, I am, and we'll be eating at Chun-Li Palace in New York. I'm 50,
there you go.
I'm 55th. Yeah.
Okay, well, now we know when it ends. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that.
Look out for that marker.
I'll call you guys from the restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to get your take on the New York Times' IRS redux story with President Trump, mainly because I just want to read an excerpt from this hilarious post at Monster Hunter Nation by this accounting professional who's now retired named Larry Correia. It's hilarious and pointed, and in some places profane, but it's also very substantive. And one of the things he mentions is the tax system is rigged in favor of people who have more resources, but that's not Trump's doing. That's the doings of Republican and Democrat administrations from time immemorial. He writes, is it unfair that rich guys can employ Gandalf-level CPAs and take advantage of more complicated tax laws while regular people use TurboTax? Yep. But in the meantime, as long as those tax laws are there, the rich guys would be utter fools not to take advantage of them. And his bottom line is nobody pays more than they have to pay. Trump is not accused of any illegality. This is a non-story.
Yeah. Stop me if I go on too long on this, but it's such a BS story. Look, the Times put out a story in 2016 titled "Donald Trump Acknowledges Not Paying Federal Income Taxes for Years." In fact, Trump said, "I don't want to pay taxes. I didn't owe them. Why would I pay them?" And that's exactly the point. Even Bernie Sanders got up in the Fox News town hall. I don't know if you remember. It was last April, and he was asked. They said, "Look, you went into the highest tax bracket because of your book." But you took full advantage of both the deductions available to you to reduce your taxable income, and then you took advantage of the lower tax rates under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which you voted against. And he said his response was, "Come on, I paid the taxes that I owe." Well, really, that's all we have any right to expect from any. I mean, who pays more than they owe? Do the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bidens, do they pay more than they owe? In fact, the only guy I know who pays more than he owes is President Trump, who donates his $400,000 salary back to the government every year. So this, and when you're in real estate, and I may get if this gets too technical, just stop me. But we have a lot of provisions in the tax code to try and incentivize conduct or discourage conduct, such as mortgage interest deductions to encourage home ownership, or taxes on alcohol and tobacco to discourage alcohol and tobacco use. So the tax code isn't just to raise revenue. The government uses it to accomplish social purposes. Well, one of the things that the government wants, is they want people to invest money in commercial real estate. So they've got provisions in the tax code that benefit people like President Trump. For example, you can deduct depreciation on a building you buy, a percentage of what you paid for it. You can deduct from your taxable income every year. Right. So you actually, since you paid that money when you bought the building, you're not paying it in subsequent years when you take the deduction for those payments. You actually could be having a cash flow on a building. You could have profits, but you wouldn't pay taxes because your taxable income was reduced by this non-tax deduction, which they call depreciation. So this idea that he didn't pay enough taxes, the real question is, did he pay what he owed? It's the Bernie Sanders test. Come on, I paid what I owed. And I don't think there's any question that Donald Trump paid what he owed. In fact, as I said, he's actually paying more than he owes now.
He is Andy Puzder, Senior Fellow at the Pepperdine University School of Public Policy, former CEO of CKE Restaurants, former nominee for U.S. Labor Secretary, author of the recently released Getting America Back to Work, and It's Time to Let America Work Again. Andy Puzder, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Join us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.